Jambo family. Once again, welcome to the 54 Correspondence Show on the Blackwood Fire Network Media for the 21st century. We do sincerely apologize for the bit of overheats that we have had right there with the connectivity, but we are back. And this is a show we get to discuss different issues that are taking place on the African continent. Beyond on Thursday, we also like to reflect on the history of the African continent with the aim of actually getting these historical facts right. For today, we shall be going back into post slavery. We need to have some of the former slaves from different parts of the world being repatriated back to the African continent. And we do have two countries that are Liberia and also Sierra Leone, which are countries where, for example, for Liberia, the U.S. freed slaves were actually resettled. And for Sierra Leone, we did have our slaves are mostly resettled from the UK and other parts of Europe. Going to starting over their new lives in Sierra Leone. So we shall be talking about those two facts. But before then, I want to share with us what is happening this particular year, which of course is also a milestone when it comes to African unity. On the Blackwood Fire Network, we are all about Black African unity and also unifying our Black people globally. It doesn't matter what part of the world that you are in, but the Blackwood Fire Network is out there to also play a role in terms of the awakening of our people globally. We discuss social economic issues. We also discuss political affairs. We discuss environmental issues. We discuss historical matters and everything else in between, with the goal of actually giving you the rightful image or the rightful perspective on the content of Africa, which is an informed perspective, not just from a hearsay, not just from what you have been told. And sometimes we do understand there is a whole lot of misleading information that is given about the beautiful continent of Africa. And this is actually done with the goal of malice and also with the goal of diminishing the dignity and the value of the African people, either on the continent or even off the continent. That is why you will hear about very mean stories being told about the continent. You will hear that everyone is walking with their belly out because of malnutrition. And you will hear that people are sick, right, left, and center on the continent of Africa, sick with HIV and AIDS, sick with typhoid and cholera, sick with other different kinds of diseases. But that is not actually the case. Even if you go to tour the continent of Africa, the 54 countries the 54 countries in the continent, I actually always do say that if you have to spend a week in every African country, for example, decide to start with South Africa, then move all the way up to Egypt, and also traverse the east and the west of the continent, you would actually take a whole year. If you decided on January 1st, I am going to tour the continent of Africa, you do have 54 weeks in a year, and that would also give you a week in every African country. And from there, your view and perspective would have actually changed. From what you hear from historical details that are given about countries such as the Ancient Kemet or Egypt, you will be able to find your own information and also your own perspective from traveling. We do know the likes of people that have the likes of Dr. Joseph Ayokanan, who is a man who was widely traveled and of course did do a bit of Egyptology, studying ancient Kemet and also understanding what used to be the history of Egypt. For him, of course, his perspective was also changed. Personally, I have not been able to tour many countries on the continent yet, but I do hope that I endeavor this particular year maybe to be able to go and see for myself. And also, we do say that travel is to see. To travel is to see, and traveling is eye opening. It opens up your eyes, it opens up your mind, and you are able to see things for yourself and also make your own determined decisions. When it comes to the continent of Africa, perhaps you might ask which are some of the places maybe I hope, and you should also look forward to maybe perhaps going and also adding on to your bucket list. I would actually start out with the Victoria Falls. The Victoria Falls, which are in Zimbabwe and Zambia. I would like to go see. The Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe and Zambia. I would also like to go see the pyramids myself, the Sphinx in Egypt. That would also be another wonderful spot to go see. Apart from that, I would also like to go to Namibia and I see for myself where the desert meets the ocean. The view, I believe it's very, very much spectacular. And apart from that, I would also like to go to Zimbabwe, see the great walls of Zimbabwe, because we do understand that there was also a civilization in Zimbabwe. And there was a construction of what we do call the Great Wall of Zimbabwe. In other parts of the world, there's also the Great Wall. For example, the Great Wall of China, which of course even still today gets to marvel people because they do not really know how it was actually done, and more details about that. But apart from that, one more place I would also like to go is to go to the Virunga National Park. The Virunga National Park is actually in the DRC, and I believe also Rwanda shares. There is also part of the Virunga which is actually in Rwanda, and that is where you do find the mountain gorillas. I have seen the big five myself. I have seen a rhinoceros. I have seen an elephant, the forest elephant. I have seen the tiger. I have seen the cheetah. I have seen the buffalo. I have seen the giraffe, but I have not seen the mountain gorilla. So I would just like maybe perhaps to go see the Virunga National Park, which is one of the oldest. I actually think the Virunga National Park is the oldest. Let me just confirm. Virunga National Park. The oldest. Let me just confirm that particular fact real quick. Yes, the Virunga National Park is found along the equator in the western edge of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Virunga National Park is one of the world's most extraordinary natural places. It is Africa's oldest national park, a World Heritage Site, and a Ramsar wetland of international importance. Yes, actually, I was right that the Virunga National Park is the oldest on the continent of Africa. So if you notify me traverse it and getting the opportunity to go see what's good in Africa, those are some of the places that perhaps I would like to go see. Like you said, in Egypt, and also see for myself the River Nile. In Congo, we also do have that Virunga National Park, and also the big river itself, the River Congo. In the southern part of the continent, we do have what I did say is the Lake Victoria Falls, which is actually shared, I believe, between Zimbabwe and Zambia, and that would also be a spectacular view to see. Apart from that, I also did say I would like to go see the pyramids in Egypt. Of course, everyone, when people hear about Africa and Egypt, the only thing that pops up in their mind is the pyramids, and also the images of the pharaohs. That is some of the things that actually pop up in the head. Apart from that, what other thing would be really interesting? Like I said, yes, Namibia, to go see where the ocean meets the desert. That is also another spectacular place. I of course also remember the one, some of the botanical gardens in Cameroon. Let me just bring them up. Let me just bring them up, because Cameroon is also said to be one of the wettest places in the world, and I do believe it also has one of the oldest botanical garden in the continent of Africa. We do have the oldest botanical garden in Africa, being in Cameroon, and I would also like to go see the variety of things. It's known as Limbe. It's known as a Limbe Botanical Gardens in Cameroon, where you might also find some of the most diverse flora and fauna in that particular part of the continent. So for me, I just said, if you actually to make a plan for a year, maybe when you retire or even before you retire, and decide this year I'm actually going to tour Africa, you would need 54 weeks, which is a whole year, for you to be able to tour one country a week, another country a week, another country a week. And I have seen people that have had that interest, and I've also had the money. For example, there's a guy known as Drew Brisky. I think his name is Drew Brisky, a YouTuber who has been able to move and seen, I bet, almost all the countries on the continent of Africa, because the people of Africa are really, really welcoming. Anywhere you go, you will find a lot of respect. You will find hospitality, and you will also find people also being very, very helpful, offering assistance, and also ready to work with you. That is a problem that you have had even on the continent, even when we were during that period of colonization, where people came in as explorers, quote unquote explorers, and the Africans were very, very kind, and the generosity of the African people cannot really actually be measured. It's immeasurable. But we do have the Libos Botanical Gardens, the second oldest in Africa, al home of, among others, cinnamon, nutmeg, mango, Asian sacchards, and an unnamed tree that locals describe as the African Viagra. There is a small visitor center and an area within Commonwealth War Graves. Guides aren't required, but recommended as labeling is minimal. Bring bag repellent. So if you're going to Limbe, you'd also have to bring some bag repellent. Apart from that, when you're talking about other places to go on the continent of Africa, I would also urge anyone who has an interest in whole history to tour places such as the Elimina slave castles in Ghana, because you'd have an understanding of how the transatlantic slave trade was actually conducted, and that would also be another wonderful place to go, to go see and also find out for yourself. Apart from that, you can also tour Zanzibar, which is in Tanzania, and Zanzibar is a wonderful place where we do have some of the best beaches in Zanzibar. So I think those are 10 spots. I guess those are about 10 spots where I would actually recommend anyone to go and indulge themselves in find out what Africa is all about. And those are just a few places. There are so many more places that you can get to visit on the continent of Africa, but I'm just sharing with you just a few of them, and that's what's up. But apart from that, I want to take us and discuss a matter of the day. What is happening right now is that this year, being 2022, we did have the African Union, or the AU. The African Union is actually turning 20 this year. And if you do get to ask me, African Union was formerly Organization of African Unity. And the Organization of African Unity, it had actually been founded in 1963, and some of the founding members include Libya under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. And in case you want to know what is the African Union, let me just share with us briefly. And of course, it's a 55. It's a body that brings together 55 countries from the continent, and you will have a little bit of understanding of this. It's turning 20. And what significance is there in the bloc turning 20? There is much significance because right now the African Union should focus on actually getting to speak in one voice. Unless the African Union speaks in one voice, then we shall not have its influence or its power being recognized anywhere. It's a little bit of the same, and let me just share it with us briefly, and you can see
Africa's future. In 1963, when a group of 32 independent African nations created the Organization of African Unity, which later became the African Union. Compared to the European Union, the African Union was formed just 5 years after the formation of the European Union, but is 6 times bigger, given that Africa has the most number of countries in a continent of any continent in the world. In this video, we are going to talk about the origins of the African Union, what it does, whether it is effective, and what its future might hold. Welcome to Reason Africa. Member states of the African Union cover almost the entirety of continental Africa and several offshore islands except for several territories held by Spain like Ceuta, Melilla, and Peña de Vélez de la Gomera. In addition, European countries have dependencies among African islands, such as France in Mayotte, Reunion, and scattered islands in the Indian Ocean, Portugal with the Azores, Madeira, and the Savage Islands, and the United Kingdom with St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan and Cunha. The official languages of the African Union are Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Swahili, and any other African language. Its promise was to bring Africans together and propel the continent towards peaceful coexistence, eradication of all forms of colonialism, economic growth, and cooperation. Unite we must was one of the rallying calls made by Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah to his peers during the first ever conference of the African Union in Addis Ababa.
This decade is the decade of African independence. Forward then to independence. To independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
Without necessarily sacrificing our sovereignties, big or small, we can, here and now, forge a political union based on defense, foreign affairs, and diplomacy, and a common citizenship, an African currency, and
of course, this was way back in 1963, and this was the Pan-Africanist Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president of Ghana. But look at from 1963 to where we are today, close to 60 years. Nothing really has actually been achieved in terms of what he had actually hoped for. And when he was talking about these are big forging of a union, which is based on defense. We do not have an African Union strong military unit. We do not have a common citizenship that would allow people to move, for example, from Kenya, going into, for example, Benin, without the need for you to be having visas, or for you to be having these passports. And we also do not have a common African currency, which of course would have propelled us a little bit much further ahead than we are right now in terms of economic prosperity and progress. As recent as last year, but one, there was a push by the ECOWAS. ECOWAS is the economic community for West African states, and the ECOWAS had actually suggested that they do roll out one common currency in that region, which I believe has about 13 member countries. I will just confirm how many members ECOWAS does have. But that did not also succeed. They wanted to call it the ECO, but even till today, even if you have to talk about the East African region, where we do have a COMESA, the Common Market for East and West African nations, you realize that we still do not have any kind of a common currency that is shared amongst African countries. And this is where we have gone wrong so many years down the line, close to 60 years down the line. For example, in the European Union, we do have the euro. But of course, there are merits and demerits. Recently, we did see Britain wanting to actually exiting these European Union and wanted to run its affairs independently. Kwame Nkrumah also had the quest for having an African monetary zone and an African central bank. We do have the African Development Bank, but we do not really, even African countries do not really conduct independently their affairs in terms of running the economies independently. The central banks is actually run from the World Bank and the IMF. These are the people who get to dictate terms of how people also get to structure and run the economies, because there is that whole big dependence which Africa has on the World Bank, and those are the people that run the world. Africa really itself cannot say to be really sovereign and free, while you do not have an independence when it comes to running your fair affairs monetarily. But nonetheless, the European, like I said, the African Union is turning 20 this year. I did say the Organization of African Union was made in 1963, but the African Union, as we know it today, was actually formally launched in 2000. In 2000. I believe it was actually launched in 2000. So prior to that, it was actually known as the Organization of African Union from 1963 to 1999. And then from 2000, it was launched again officially. It was launched as the African Union, which has its headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
African Monetary Zone and an African Central Bank. Soon after achieving independence in the 60s, a number of African states expressed a growing desire for a united Africa. Not everyone was agreed on how this unity could be achieved, however, and two factions emerged in this respect. First, the Casablanca Bloc, led by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, wanted a federation of all African countries into one federal unit like the United States of America. Aside from Ghana, it also comprised Algeria, Guinea, Morocco, Egypt, Mali, and Libya. Second was the Monrovian Bloc, led by Leopold Senghor of Senegal, felt that unity should be achieved gradually through economic cooperation. It did not support the notion of a political federation. Its other members were Nigeria, Liberia, Ethiopia, and most of the former French colonies. Despite the antagonistic position separating them, the groups both favored to set up an African institution based on the principles of state sovereignty and non-interference in the internal affairs of member states. The dispute was eventually resolved when Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie I invited the two groups to Addis Ababa, where the Organization of African Unity and its headquarters were subsequently established. Decolonization and African rule, particularly in the colonial settler states of Algeria, Kenya, and South Africa, where racism was institutionalized, were major achievements of the OAU. The culminating effect was the liberation of South Africa from apartheid in 1994, ending 82 years of struggle through 31 years of support by the continent through the OAU. The solid opposition to white minority rule and colonialism is undoubtedly the OAU's greatest achievement.
This is in respect to the organization, the African Union. really marking 20 years since it was
It
officially launched.
succeeded in mobilizing African and world opinion against colonialists in the last Portuguese colonies of Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Sao Tome and Principe, and against settler states of Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. The organization was, however, viewed critically for failing to address many of the continent's issues, mainly the policy of non-interference in the affairs of member states severely limited the effectiveness of the body. The organization expressed little or no solidarity with Africans facing challenges from their own governments and never recognized the legitimacy of African struggles against African tyrants. Often dubbed the Dictators Club, it gained a reputation for being a mere talking shop. It struggled to enforce its decisions, and its lack of an armed force made military intervention exceedingly difficult. Civil wars in Nigeria, Angola, and Rwanda continued unabated for years, and the OAU could do nothing to stop them. In the year 2000, in a move spearheaded by Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, it was proposed that the Organization of African Unity be replaced by a new body, the African Union. Its structure is loosely modeled on that of the European Union. The African Union was to be more economic in nature, similar to its counterpart in Europe, and would contain a central bank, a court of justice, a human rights court, an all-Africa parliament, and by 2023, an African economic community with a common currency called the Afro. After a transition
That I can tell you for a fact that in 2023, which is next year, we shall not have any common currency in Africa known as an Afro. That I can guarantee for a fact, because we have failed. We have been making tremendous progress. I would include the fact that we have had what you call the African Continental Free Trade Area, which was actually ratified by many African countries by last year but one. And there was also a meeting, a conference held in Rwanda, which also brought together all African leaders in respect to be able to move together as one common unit when it comes to the matters of trade, and removing all non-tariff trade barriers for countries and eliminating all those to make it simpler for people to be able to move their goods, because we understand trade is about the movement of people and goods. But when it comes to having one economic monetary unit, that I can actually tell you for a fact that in Africa, we have failed miserably. Maybe they would have to push it to about maybe 2033, I would have said, because in 2023, that is not going to happen. I would actually guarantee that for a fact that is not actually going to happen. But for me, I am an ardent believer that we can be able to move much further ahead in terms of political cohesion, in terms of economic cohesion, and working as one unit. Because if you look at how Africa was divided like a pie, when you did have the 1884 Berlin the 1884 Berlin Conference, which of course was led by the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, what did happen is Africa was divided into small units, and these units were supposed to weaken the continent, or supposed to weaken the people, and not the continent itself. We did not have Uganda, we did not have Kenya, neither did we have Ethiopia or Somalia or Guinea-Bissau, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. We did not have all those small units. But now, eventually, what did happen after colonization? These units continue to be weakened, and they were weakened so that they would continue to be easily subdued by the colonizers. You did hear even about the settler states, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia. These are not settler states. These are people whose land was actually stolen, and stories made and the land taken. But nonetheless, let me share a little bit briefly on the same with the African Union and why maybe perhaps we are still there talking about currency that we have not even been able to allow. We have not been able to agree on the basic minimum. But now, how are you going to agree on the currency? We do not have an African Union strong military force, and therefore all these things that were said in 1963, close to 60 years down the line, these are just stories. This is just what I call wishful thinking. It has been put on paper. Africa actually is the best when it comes to making a blueprint for strategies, for the way to move forward. But now look at about execution and implementing these blueprints for successful Africa, for an Africa where people have actually been held out of poverty and people have also been assisted out of things like disease and other challenges. These are things that are on paper. On paper, the African Union has a very wonderful manifesto. We might call it a manifesto, but look at the execution. When you did have all these wars, civil wars going on, for example, in Sierra Leone, we did have a civil war for about 10 years. Angola also did have a civil war. Central African Republic and Chad also did have their civil war. In Rwanda, they did have in 1994, they did have the genocide, which of course led to the loss of millions of people and the lives of over 1 million people in 30 days. But where was the African Union in that time? Where was the Organization of African Unity? It wasn't nowhere to be seen because it was just seen as a barking dog, which has not even have teeth.
Period. The African Union replaced the OAU in July 2002 with 51 member states. The AU came equipped with stronger administrative mechanism, greater powers of intervention, and an armed force equipped for humanitarian intervention. It is made up of both political and administrative bodies. The leadership consists of a chairperson, where leaders who hold office rotate on an annual basis. The Assembly, which comprises heads of state of member countries who meet at least once a year. It is the AU's main decision-making body. Members of the Assembly are also tasked with electing the AU chairperson. The Executive Council. This comprises foreign ministers of member states who advise Assembly members. And finally, the Commission. This is the administrative branch comprising 10 commissioners who hold individual portfolios. The Commission implements AU policies and coordinates the body's activities and meetings. The AU set about distancing itself from OAU by often suspending countries where coups take place and readmitting them when they return to constitutional rule. To this end, it set up a Peace and Security Council in 2004. The Council may intervene in conflicts, replacing the old OAU principle of non-interference with one of non-indifference. South Sudan became the 54th member state when it became the world's youngest nation in 2011. For over 30 years, the only African country that was a United Nations member but not a member of the African Union was Morocco, which withdrew from the OAU in 1984 after the body granted membership to the Saharan Arab Democratic Republic set up by the independence movement in the disputed territory of Western Sahara. It became the 55th country in the Union. Morocco was later readmitted in the AU in 2007. The African Union, however, came under sharp criticism over its failure to act over the civil war in Libya and its silent demeanor when Gaddafi was removed from power by Western nations. Africa has come a long way since the formation of what became the AU. It has created many useful decision-making structures that have contributed to the prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts in Africa. The AU has, however, been less successful in connecting.
On the commentary that he has made, actually one point that also stands out for me that shows the total weakness of these African Union is that when the president of Muammar Gaddafi was killed, was actually murdered, there was silence from the African Union. And you cannot just go into place where there is a bloc and talk about having any kind of a strength or any kind of a dependency when you do have one of the leaders of the African Union bloc actually being killed, and you would actually say that this is actually dependent. And I would say this was a shameful moment for the African Union, and we know why it was a shameful moment because I do believe it was done simply because these are leaders who have been put there, who also are looking after the interest, who are also looking after the interest of the Western powers. You might call them the Western powers. And there was one of the men who actually spoke out. There was one of the men who actually spoke out about why perhaps there was silence when it comes to the matter of Gaddafi being killed? That was Museveni, who was actually saying that he wanted an African army to defend Gaddafi from aggressors who destabilized Libya. But he was saying this while it was way too late. You were saying this while it was way too late. Let me just share briefly on why Africa really went silent. I do believe it's because these leaders, who I'll call the African Union leaders, also are complicit. They could not really do much.
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies.
Could you just take a moment to imagine what would have happened if Nelson Mandela was president of South Africa when NATO forces invaded Libya and deposed Muammar Gaddafi? Would South Africa have intervened? A grandson of Nelson Mandela is named Gaddafi, a sign of how popular the late Libyan leader once was in South Africa and many other African countries. Gaddafi's 42-year regime in Libya saw him go from revolutionary hero to international outcast, to valued strategic partner, and back to outcast again. Despite being seen as a Pan-African who sought African unity, Gaddafi was also accused of backing notorious rebel groups in Liberia and Sierra Leone, among others. As much as he was despised by the West, particularly France, Italy, Britain, and America, he made a lot of enemies and was also viewed as a threat to some African regimes, and it's possible that this explains why organs of the continent, such as the African Union, looked on silently without a whimper of protest in 2011, when Western armies were pummeling Libya with bombs. Either way, I believe an unmistakable sense of trauma marks African countries' action or inaction to the fall of Gaddafi.
What did happen is that people were told that if there was a killing of Gaddafi, they would have been able to be liberated. But this is not the case. People actually lied to, and they decided not to side with their own leader. And also, I did see Museveni making a point that people should have stood up.
The situation in Libya was created by the arrogant and irresponsible actions of some actors that took actions that were against the express position of the African Union. I can reveal to you that those actors had a narrow escape. When some actors started attacking Libya against the decision of the African Union, I contacted His Excellency Jacob Zuma of South Africa and proposed that African armies that so decided to intervene in Libya and confront and teach a lesson to those aggressors. We were let down by Muammar Gaddafi, who abandoned Tripoli without a fight. Although at that time I did not have a direct link with Muammar Gaddafi, I advised his envoy, who came to see me here, to turn Tripoli into a Stalingrad. With H.E. Jacob Zuma, we had to work out a solution for the aircrafts and cruise missiles that some people use to attack defenseless people from far away, so that if the aggressors so wished, could come on the ground and we fight man to man. Such a confrontation would, of course, have been imposed on us unnecessarily. We have, since a long time ago, stated that the African patriots, like we in the NRA, are neither pro-West nor pro-East. We are first and foremost pro-Africa.
These awards being sailed when it was way too late. Of course, Muammar Gaddafi was killed in 2011, and I was just saying that that was failed. You know, the African Union, you cannot talk about the African Union really being truly independent and keeping quiet when there was a killing of Muammar Gaddafi and the country being destabilized to what we know as now today. And apart from that, I wanted to go into the matter of the day and talk about the issue of the freed slaves and their resettlement back on the continent. And of course, I would say that in America, when the slaves were freed, they were actually brought back into the continent and resettled back on the continent of Africa. And these, we will say that Liberia would be considered as America's African colony, because that is where people were actually returned to. And of course, even still today, I do believe that the matters of Liberia are likely to a very very big to a very very big to a very very big impact, to a very very big extent, run by the US. You know, even till today, to a very very big extent, the matters there are also run or determined by the US, even if that is where people will talk about still being sovereign. But then, nonetheless, let me share a little bit of this particular video so they can also get to understand how it did happen and how Liberia is considered. This West African country is considered to be a colony of the US. It was a place where the slaves were freed and also resettled. But there was a problem with that, because the locals, or the people that were there, felt that the freed slaves were not trying to be reintegrated back. They're trying to come and be bossy, or come and assert the authority on them.
Liberia, a country that you might know nothing about. Actually, most likely know nothing about. Liberia can probably be described as the most weirdest country in the world just because of its founding and early history alone. So, first off, the country of Liberia is known for being one of the two countries that survived European colonization. Ethiopia being the other one, fighting tooth and nail to get the Italians out. But it's the Italians, so you know how that went. But unlike Liberia, Ethiopia was conquered by the Italians in the end, even though they never really surrendered. But that's kind of hard to say since, well, they did get conquered, but sure, whatever, you do you. And even though the territory of Liberia avoided the Brits, Dutch, and Portuguese, there were still enemies on the horizon. That being the United States of America. Even though a lot of people might not know that Liberia was colonized by the Americans, or that America even had colonies, which they did, definitely, it becomes pretty clear in the very second you open your eyes and see the truth. It can be seen in the name, in the flag, in the capital, and, well, everything in the country. The name Liberia comes from the word liberty. Sound familiar? The flag is a clear ripoff of the American one, but with only one star. And even the capital, Monrovia, is named after the fifth US President of Freedom, James Monroe. It can be seen all over the country. The religion, the language, the political system, the military. The Americans made it all. But again, maybe it's a good thing that the Liberians didn't make that much in their own country. We have seen what they're capable of. Oh yeah, those are official flags in Liberia. The Americans funded and founded the colony through the ACS, or American Colonial Society, in a way of spreading American territory. So the Americans made it, the Americans influenced it, and the Americans founded it. Yet they did not settle there. What are they doing? So the main thing about Liberia, which not only makes me the most surprised, but was the main reason why I made this video in the first place, was their weird and unexpected history of slavery. So since Liberia is along the West African coast, you would expect this to be the prime place for European colonization, where they would build trading posts and begin expanding the triangle trade with their American colonies. But in fact, they didn't. Dutch, British, and Portuguese traders They traded with the natives and did show interest in the area, especially that pepper that had along the coast, which is why they called it Pepper Coast. How original. Yet it did not evolve into anything. As we talked about before, Daddy Freedom did sail over to Africa and made a safe zone of sorts in the area. This safe zone was used for something unusual. Instead of shipping black people out by force, they brought black people in through peace. Beginning in 1822, the free slaves who had escaped from the South got a deal from the North. They could return to Africa, their home continent, if they wanted to, in maybe the most peaceful way of ever saying go back to a country ever. But again, to be fair, the Afro-Americans were kind of annoyed that they had no rights in, well, all of the Americas, so it makes sense that they wanted to leave. The former slaves would now start life anew in Africa, even though they came from all over the continent, but sure, Liberia is fine. Even though Liberia wasn't an American colony by definition, they still kept it as a part of their own and did protect the country with the US military. However, it all ended in 1847 when they declared their independence. They grew up so fast. People came flooding in, with a silent population of 4.5 thousand people, whereafter 2/3 died of disease in a few weeks. But then 13,000 people came in and started colonizing the area. The former slaves now lived a new life, and they lived happily ever after in their home continent. Except for their slaves. Yeah. So they apparently learned a bit about economics from their former owners down south and made their own slave trade. The biggest 180 in history. The Americo-Liberians, which the settlers are known as, did get influenced by Western culture back in the Liberty Land and saw themselves as being a part of this Western culture, even though they might have been at the very bottom of it. But the Americo-Liberians didn't really care and made their own civilization where they ruled over the land since they saw the natives as uncivilized and savages, even though they themselves were foreigners who had just been under the same kind of authority. You become the very thing you swore to destroy. This basically led to a divided country where there was an upper class who had all the cash, property, and slaves, and a lower class where the people didn't at all divided by race. Also, this system never began to decline either. The American Liberians kept power up until 1980, about 158 years after the experiment started. The indigenous people had had enough and made a coup against the government, with Samuel Doe at the forefront. He was the first non-Americo-Liberian who ruled the country. This led to chaos almost immediately, and not only one, but 2 civil wars ensued, and it is now labeled a failed state. Oh well. So what can this tell us? It can tell us that power is something that can corrupt anyone, and anyone who has the chance to get power over others, even if they themselves were.
That was exactly also what did happen with Sierra Leone. The same case also did happen with Sierra Leone, where people actually were resettled back from Europe, as been freed as from slavery. And when they were resettled back on the continent, they decided also to do the same thing that was done to them by the colonizers, by the slave owners, doing it to the people, the African people there. And that did not augur very, very well with the people there. And in 1980, that is when there was a coup. There was a removal of these American Liberians, and there was now the introduction of a leader, Samuel Doe, who was a native and trying to make things work in that particular country. Apart from that, there was civil war. Liberia also, there was civil war. So for many reasons, there was that did not really work any good for anyone on there. And it was all chaos.
Hello, I'm Dennis Demir.
They protected themselves. Finally, as time passed, they started to understand one another. But originally,
This is another brief video which asks the questions: did Black Americans or Liberians enslave the natives or the indigenous they found there after having been resettled on the continent?
James Monroe, because he helped. He helped. Unilaterally, he helped.
Now, another argument is that the Americans came with the white man's mindset and that they enslaved the indigenous people and they implemented a system of apartheid. What are your thoughts when people say that?
I look at it as a blatant fallacy. Because if you came somewhere and you were accepted, you will live peaceably, right?
Right.
But there was a very hard time for the settlers, for the king.
Okay, now were the indigenous tribes involved in any type of slave trade, or were they beefing or warring with each other? Like when you say it was a hard time when they came, like
because slavery was still going on.
Right.
When they came here, the King Bromley, the son Kaipa was still carrying on slavery with the whites. Mostly Spanish at the time now, because all of these superpowers got into the slave business. See, the people they could stay here from their origin, so they were not plentiful. There were few, and then they just started to dominate them by waging a series of travel wars on them to exterminate all of them, and they had to stand to defend themselves because they didn't come. They never came to take any land free. The land was bought. They didn't bother the natives. They protected themselves. Finally, as time passed, from the people didn't actually need to give the land. But after everything was settled, the people came, the people came, settled one, and they started waging war on the people. Oh, the people here, they're not from here. They didn't come from here. How did they know that the particular land they were taken from this same area here and brought back? How did they know they came from this area? But they had already received payment for the land. So the land was justifiably for the people. And you understand? For the people, they had no money. There was no act of slavery being repeated because the people knew how the forefathers work. And they all prayed for the abolition of slavery, and they were free. Why should the native now in abundance come and start fighting them to exterminate other than they had to fight back? So your insecurity for your own life, you got to take time with it. You couldn't get yourself up. There was a series of inter-tribal wars, whatnot, because they saw that these people were people that were sold from this particular geographic origin. Yeah. They were sold. Black men all came from no part of the world besides Africa. That's a clear indication and manifestation that these people came from Africa. They came from this particular era. So the apartheid system was done by the same white and predominantly because before apartheid even got established in South Africa had the same problem. South Africa was only used as a trading point in the back days.
Sure.
The Boers, the Dutch left Europe trading with the Far East because in the early days, the Far East, India and China was like America. All the goods came from India or China. And there was a very long route from Europe to pass through the Strait of the Mediterranean Sea, pass through the Strait of Gibraltar, come along the Mediterranean Sea, jump in the Indian Ocean before you reach to the Far East. Very long route. But finally, when the British, when the Boers and the Dutch left Europe doing trading, they would come and disembark their goods at the port, the Cape of Goods for South Africa. Cape Town, exactly. There, traders will come with goods from India, China, what they disembark their goods. They trade and they exchange. You make the good shop. This will be our starting point. Since I come from where you coming from Asia, we will put our goods there We trade. You take my goods, I take yours. And you understand? To make the route shorter. So when the white man got to see that this was very pleasant, this agreement was pleasant, the white man from Europe, he took that place. I said, let me place. They built trading posts and whatnot. Finally, they started delving into the people's system because the people were indigenous. The white man met 3 tribes. He met the Dutch, he met the African, he met the Bush, not the African king, the Africans are mixed. The Dutch, the Bushman, and the Talking. There were the 3 original tribes, and each of these tribes had a distinct characteristic. The Bushmen were hunters. The Hottentots, they live on the coast, as South Africa that we're talking about. They live on the coast. They were something like cattle raisers. They used to raise cattle. The Zulus were warriors. So the Zulus never succumbed to any hardship from invading powers. They fought the white man.
This is a brother talking about the animosity. Let me just call it animosity, which did exist between the people that came in, that were resettled back on the continent in Liberia, and also the people that they found there, and there was that disagreement, and also people felt these people are not supposed to be here, and then there was also the settlers are also trying to oppress the people that they found there, and then until 1980, 100 years, so about 180 years later, we did find them now getting into war, and the government really being thrown out by the indigenous people that were not African, not Afro-Liberians. But right now, as we speak, Liberia is celebrating 200 years of having actually welcomed the people that were resettled back into the continent. And this is the 200 years of the arrival of the freed slaves. Delivering a special statement at the start of the Bicentennial Celebration on the historic Providence Island, President George Weah called on all citizens, irrespective of their social, political, and economic backgrounds, to embrace the commemoration of Liberia's 200 years of statehood towards strengthening national unity and peace. The Bicentennial Celebration is a year-long event paying homage to Africa's first republic, whose founding essentially began with the arrival of freed black slaves from the United States of America on what is now called Providence Island 200 years ago. And like I said, the capital city is known as Monrovian. According to the U.S. ambassador to Liberia, it says our shared history is literally written into the geography from Monrovia to Maryland County, the cities between, such as Buchanan, named after the cousin of the U.S. President, James Buchanan Grenville, named for Mississippi Delta planter, the Harper, named after U.S. Senator Bush, Rhode Island, named after a favorite nephew of George Washington. Today, our collective goal is the same as it was 200 years ago, prosperous and a self-reliant Liberia, he said. And I was just saying that the way everything is run, you would think this is a small America on the continent, and the affairs are likely also influenced to a very, very large extent by the U.S. government. I would also say Liberia was the first African country on the continent to have a female president, and her name, the name of this first woman president was Sirleaf Johnson. Sirleaf Johnson, and she came into power after a period of these civil wars in Liberia, and after that, now we have the current president. His name is George Weah, who was a former football legend. He was a football legend really, but he was a former footballer, professional footballer. And things have not been going any good for this particular country. If you look at the level of corruption, the levels of poverty, the levels of the education level is not any good. This is a country really struggling, even after being labeled as a country that got its independence the earliest in Africa. Of course, they do say Ethiopia was not colonized. We know that Ethiopia was also taken by the Italians, but that story is not really told. But this is a country that you would figure, or you would think, had a better head start, because we did have people coming back, being resettled as slaves, and maybe perhaps they had an understanding of how maybe to run proper economic systems from what they had learned from the US in southern states. But that is not what happened. What happened is that when they came back, power started corrupting their minds. They wanted more of it, and they wanted to control and have power over the natives they found on that particular part of the continent, and things did not go any good. But anyhow, family, that was a little bit of a discussion about Liberia. This was a Fit for Correspondence show on the Blackwood Financial Media for the 21st century. And I just think that you have had a wonderful opportunity getting to learn a thing or two about Liberia, and also getting to learn a thing or two about the African unity, and some of the things that we are facing as an African people. We can only come together and build as one, or we can only continue being divided and being weakened and being conquered all the time. Our call right here on the Blackwood Financial is to unite as a Black people. I consider myself as an Afro-optimist. I believe that Africa can come together, and I believe that Africa can be powerful again, but that cannot happen by mere wishful thinking. It has to come by goodwill from different governments. It has to come by goodwill from the people as well, to try and work together as an African people across the continent of Africa. It has been a delight sharing this particular information with you, and I just want to wish you a happy and productive remaining part of the day. I know it's quite early in the morning for some, but right here in Nairobi, it's actually 17 minutes to 4 p.m. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful show. And I do hope that you have learned a thing or two. You can engage with us on our social media platforms. We are on Twitter at Blackwood Fire. We are on Instagram, Blackwood Fire Network, and also on Facebook. Please like our page. It's blackwoodfirenetwork.com. And in case you would like to support the stream, you can simply also do so by Cash App. That is Mr. Blackwood Fire on Cash App. Do not also forget to visit our official website. It's www.blackwoodfirenetwork.com. We truly value and appreciate your support. And thank you so much for being part of the Blackwood Fire Network. We never take your company or your support in vain. So till next time, much peace and love. I want to wish you a happy and a productive remaining part of the day. I do say kwaheri.